Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. Today we're going to be doing a pretty large concrete area in the backyard here because we got garages. We've got 6 garages in the back courtyard here through this drive-through. Also, this drive-through area is going to be coming out. The wood fences are going to be coming out, or wood gates, I should say. And they're going to be replaced with something else. We're going to put new steel post in to support the new fence gate, actually. Anyway, getting onto this driveway area here, you can see how cracked up it is. The control joints are about 15 feet apart, and then there's no reinforcement in it. We discovered as we started removing the concrete. So right now we have a new guy in training on the tractor. He's on the New Holland, and he's kind of in training still. So that's why there's another guy watching over him at all times. You'll notice that as we go through this. And this is actually a very difficult removal. It's not just your standard break the concrete out and then go in and scoop it up kind of thing, because underneath this concrete, it's about 6 inches of clean fill sand. So rubber tires really don't get it done when you're trying to scoop up concrete, and they find that out really quickly, that it's kind of tricky with tires on sand. The concrete's pretty thin as well. It's only coming out about 3 inches thick. You can tell how he's operating this breaker, that he's definitely in training, how slow he's maneuvering it. And normally a guy that's been doing it a while, you could tell a big difference. I mean, they're just swinging it effortlessly, boom, 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 boom. So it took quite a bit longer to remove this, in other words. But I'm glad that he did that slow, though, actually, because if he was trying to do it quicker and he didn't really have the experience, could have been a real nightmare. Could have did collateral damage at that point. Now you'll notice the tires when he goes. You notice how they spin and the tractor doesn't really move forward. That's when you wish you had tracks in situations like that. But there's no tractor perfect for every job. Every job's going to require something different. And, you just can't get it right every time. So you work with what you got. This concrete got a lot of use out of it. It was in here for about 50 years. So, as far as usability, it was great, but visibility wasn't that great, but it still was functional. Here's the old gate hardware that was fastened to the house. And it had been actually all the red, this is all redwood siding, and also that gate is original to this house, and they're about 50, 60 years old, this particular property. It's original redwood, which you can't really buy anymore because this is all clear redwood. And to duplicate these slats of redwood, you'd have to have it custom made. It costs a fortune. But that gate's original, which is surprising to see a wood gate last, 50 years. But the hinges failed before the wood did, in other words. But they're getting away from that redwood, and they're going to go with steel, powder coated. And we're going to put some post in here to start with. So as you can see, as we removed it and I examined the base to see, every time I remove something, I try to think of how can I improve it, to prevent what's happening to it from happening again. So I look at the base, and then I decided, well, it has clay is the actual native soil here. It's a real expansive soil, but they had 6 inches of clean sand over the top of that, which is perfect for fluctuating clay because it just moves the sand without moving everything around it. Wow, that cut it like butter. This didn't really. Oh, redwood. Isn't that redwood?
I think so, yeah.
That's old redwood, man.
Looks
Completely clear redwood. There's not a defect in that. That's old growth. Old growth for sure. This whole siding is the same. That's why it's still here after 80 years. Yeah, that's when I discovered about the siding of the house and how it was originally built. Right there when I started cutting into it. And back to the base material, what I'm going to do to improve, from all the cracking. First of all, I'm going to leave, this is a great base that they have here for this particular type of soil that it's on. And I'm just going to increase the thickness of the concrete. I'm going to put fiber mesh in, and I'm going to put Owens Corning rebar at 2-foot centers in both directions. So while I was here, I noticed a bunch of overhead wires, stuck to the side of the house. So I suggested that we drop some conduit under and drop all the, cable underground so we don't have to fasten it to the outside of the house. And it's really, it's all that Ethernet cord basically. That's going to be end up transitioning from the outside of the house through this conduit. You can see the cables there on the right of the screen. Got about 4 or 5 Ethernets that go all over the place. So it'll still come out of the house at that point. Instead of going overhead, it'll just drop down. Maybe put a little LB, like a little box enclosure right there, and drop it in. Push it on through. And then right here, I just cut that grass instead of a little angle to the shed pad. We're just gonna do a straight angle. That way we can eliminate crack points. Because if you have an inside corner projecting into the field, and it's gonna crack off of it, and this way we just angle it and eliminate a crack point that we don't have to try to follow with control joints. Right here where we're tying in to the channel drain, we're going to drill because we don't want the concrete to shift or raise or lower because we are on expansive. So we're going to drill everything in. Still using the same Owens Corning fiberglass rod. And they can take a real good beating driving them in there. So this is drill and drive. No epoxy needed in something like this. You can't get them out. So the nice thing about when you're pouring on, when you have so much sand on top of clay, clay normally gets really muddy and sticky when it's wet, which is the optimal time to pour on it because it's already expanded to its full potential, which means it's not going to expand anymore. In order to crack the concrete, it only shrink from there. And shrinking is okay because you can bridge it, but when it expands, it's going to pop it. So you want it at its expanded, most expansive state when you pour the concrete, and you can't just do that on native clay with no base over the top because you're going to pick up mud on your boots, put it in the concrete, and it's going to be a real mud hole basically. But with this clean sand on top, you don't have to worry about that. The water flows through the sand into the clay, and you have a good surface still to walk on. That's the ideal situation. And then I think that sand base over clay is actually better than a road base, like a crushed concrete, because the water flows through the sand rather than just laying up on top and running off. Here's the expansion foam I'm going to put on because we're in between two structures here, fixed structures that have foundations, and they're going to move independently from one another. And then we have a thin piece of concrete 5 inches thick in between. Something's got to give if something shifts. And I'm going to put the foam in to prevent something from giving. That way we have that space so they can move independently from one another without having to snap concrete in the middle. So here's the improvement that I've made from the previous pour. We went deeper. For one thing, we went 5 inches. We went higher PSI, and we went Owens Corning reinforcement, 18 to 2 foot center, somewhere in that vicinity. And then we went fiber mesh. Also, here's another big improvement is the saw cut pattern or control joints. We're going to do them at about 6 to 8 foot centers, both directions. Here's the breezeway area or drive-through. There's your conduit run to pick up those Ethernet so it doesn't have to go overhead anymore. See the steel pipes we got in? Those are powder coated and painted. Here's a beautiful overhead view off the drone. Got all my screed pins set. We've got about 10-foot bays in here. Now this back area has really good slope to the channel drain, the existing channel drain against the back. We have about 4 inches of slope, cross slope, and about 25 feet. So we got good slope to the channel drain. Through that breezeway, it's very tight. There's not much slope at all. Matter of fact, the original concrete had zero. It was level under the breezeway, which was kind of standard back in the day. They said, well, it's got a roof over it. Why slope it? No water's going to ever get there. But it really does. From drainage, from washing it down, things of that nature. So I had to adjust that. So we preset the post with some concrete 4 inches below top of the new slab. Got 4L concrete pumping out here today, and one of the independent concrete suppliers. These independent guys, in other words, what they do is they have their own truck. They just pull into a plant and then get batched out from whoever's the nearest. So you're getting the closest batch plant, and then you're scheduling. It's pretty much the same as anywhere, but you know, you might get the same guy all the time. Now I'm dropping the fiber mesh in here. These are 2-pound bags. Since we're using 3/8 gravel, this stuff has to be around 3/8 or less. That's the difference. On your fiber strand length, you're getting into 3/4 and 1 inch. You can go bigger strands, but on the 3/8 minus, you want to go shorter strands. The concrete mix design we're using is a 3250 city mix, or C3250, which means no fly ash. And that's about a 6.5 sack per yard of cement. 6.5 90-pound bags per yard, cubic yard, is the mix. Cement's kind of getting hard to come by, you know, because of all the where they make it. It's hard to make it, you know, in the United States due to power issues and stuff like that. So a lot of this stuff's imported from different countries, the cement specifically. So a lot of times what happens is you'll get the cement substituted with fly ash a lot because, well, it costs less and it's more readily available, because when you're burning coal, you get fly ash. So you can just throw it in there and dispose of it. But I prefer cement, to be honest with you. Here's a 4-foot wood bowl float. And as we screed this off, we just kind of pull the pins off as we go out. That duct tape you see around that stake is actually holding the screed on so it doesn't slip down. So a lot of times they do, especially if you've been using the same clips for a long time. They start getting kind of tension and the steel gets loose or bent. In our previous video, we showed the little slab for the shed, and then the video before that, we showed the garage floor. Another benefit of those dowels sticking into the side of the concrete, it actually holds your reinforcement up, so you don't have to pull up as much stuff as you're pouring out. You just have to worry about the inside, the field area. So that's 20 yards right now. We've just poured down there, and then we're gonna have about a 4 yard cleanup. And on that 4 yard cleanup, it was a touch and go. We had to actually drain the entire pump hose to get every drop of concrete out to make it. In other words, we had to fill up the pump with water to give it pressure to push the concrete out of the hose. There was no more concrete to force out there's no more concrete in the concrete truck to dump into the pump to push the concrete out, so we used water instead to push the concrete out of the hose. Here's a little funny float action here. What that is, it's a hand float basically that's on a pole, and that's what makes it funny. Typically, this is a fairly new invention. Probably came out about 35 years ago. And before this, you just use a hand float, and you never hand float the middle. You might use a bowl float on poles with weights, or you might use a Fresno with weights. Then you got the funny trowels, then you got the funny floats to kind of ease what you had to do on the knee boards. Instead of two passes on the sliders, you might get away with one or none, depending on how good the guys are operating these pole tools. And this is where we got a cleanup load, and we used every last drop through here because it was thick. So we already hit this with the funny float. Now we're just coming behind it with a funny trowel. We broke up the team at this point. We've got one guy falling back to do some touch-ups while the rest are laying it down. Actually, me and Juan stayed back, and then the other guys were laying it down. Now this is a little head cam action off of me. That trowel's 20 by 5, which means it's making it nice and flat for me. As long as that entire surface of that trowel is touching the concrete, I know it's flat. And as I was saying earlier about the slope in this breezeway or drive-through, what I did initially, they had it level through here. What I did to correct that is in the center of this breezeway, I picked it up 2 inches. Now I'm draining it in 2 directions. Half of it's going to the backyard to the channel drain and catch basin. The other half is draining out the front driveway. And you can see I'm out there on the sliders right there, cutting some concrete because I noticed a slope problem. Now the whole gang's out here falling back, knocking it out. We're getting ready to broom this. We're going to be using the Marion Brush Manufacturing Company product, and it's the Chameleon. That's what this particular item is called. And if you're interested, if you want to get one of these, I'll put it in the description. This broom is really great for long runs if you don't want any stop and starts and just pull it on through. So I can go about, I've got 100 foot of rope on them. So I can go quite a distance. You have to have 2 guys on it, 1 guy on either end of the rope. That way you can keep it going perfectly straight. And then you can just pull it right on back. So you can roll stuff over them. You don't trip over them. They don't hold water. They don't collect dirt. They don't stain. Minimize the water that a control joint holds. You have a lot less problems. But that's all future stuff. I mean, it looks good with a nice rounded joint for the time being, but come back a few years later, you see the water deposits and dirt settling and staining out from them. Then you realize, oh, maybe that wasn't that great of an idea after all. But I did get the check quicker. So I had the guys retrowel that because I thought it was too coarse. So they went ahead and went over that again. That's the thing about that broom. When you're running it across, it's not like you can stop and start when you're on a rope. So if the concrete's not drying really uniform on pure sunlight, that tool is not that great. You got to be out wide open. Here's the Tomahawk backpack spray, and I'm putting some curing compound on it. So we wrapped up the first 20, got a cold joint off the corner of the house, and then, now here's the difference between, a lot of people get finished concrete, and no doubt about that, but there's a difference between a guy that can actually see elevation and see grade. That's what really makes it a concrete finisher really good. When you can see the slope and you have to attack it because you know it ain't right just by visually looking at it, and then you go out there with a level and you go, oh shit, yeah, look, I guess I was right. Now you're cutting concrete down to get the slope right. Basically, what we had at this cold joint was a hump. That hump would have held a lot of water back from drainage, so I had to get out there and carve it down, basically. So you can see how hard the concrete is on the left side of that stick that I'm using, the Milwaukee Red Stick 6-footer, or it might be the 4-footer, I'm not sure, but it's harder. I'm cutting down hard on the left because I'm at the cold joint. That I'm centering on that cold joint right now because it humped up right where the two met, and I'm trying to spread that out so we get some drainage. Because I have a break point in the middle of this breezeway going two directions, and I can't get it. The water can't be held up from flowing to its destination by a berm or whatever speed bump. So I got to cut it down. That's what I did there. Now the brooms we're using here is we're still sticking to the nylon, but now we're not using the rope pull broom. We're just freehanding it. Now what we're doing here is showing the owner the water preparation, how to keep it wet overnight. Here's the day after the pour. We're laying out the chalk lines for saw cutting. And you notice we're using blue chalk. That's crucial because if you were to use red, red's not going to disappear. And when you go to rinse it off, red stays there. It's really hard to remove. You probably have to sand it off or use a muriatic acid or something. But so if you use blue, you can cut it. If you're not right on the line, it doesn't matter because the line's going to wash off. Right here we have the cordless DeWalt vacuum. It's for concrete. And we have the skill saw. It's a Medusa, designed for cutting concrete. It has a water attachment, also has a vacuum attachment. And it rolls really straight. Once you drop it in and you have that thing in line, your guide post lined up with the outside line, it just rolls straight. I mean, it doesn't try to pull one side or the other, so you don't really have to fight it. You notice I have two lines there. I don't know what happened. Somewhere or another, our lines got offline, so we had to re-snap it and make some adjustments. But we caught it before we cut it. That's the main thing. Now, had that happened in a wet cut, we wouldn't have been able to make any adjustment, and would have been, it is what it is at that point. Here's the Milwaukee 9-inch battery powered cutoff saw. It's a nice tool to touch up your finals at the end. Really great for cutting steel too. You notice when I meet the ends of the cuts, I drop down a little bit deeper, because cracks always start off the edges. They normally don't start in the middle. If you've ever noticed concrete, they always start at the perimeter and work in. So when I'm cutting, I'm dropping my blade right at the end, almost full depth, just to be sure that that's where it picks up. That crack starts there. If I'm shallow in the middle, it's not going to matter, because it starts on the edges and then it works in. Here's some little ponds and what have you the homeowner had laying around for the grandchildren, and we just pressure washed it because we were there and we had the pressure washer going. Made it like brand new again. Then we pressure washed the street and make that like we were never there. We got the wet vac out too in the street, just to pick up any residual. After we wet vac it, we dump that in a planter in the lawn or something like that, because we don't really cart that away. But there it is, beautiful overhead shot. And you can see the cuts are about 6 to 8. We're probably looking at 6 by 8 foot sections rather than the 14 by 14s previously. So that'll make a big difference alone in crack control. And this is just the second day after the pour. It's going to get a lot lighter, of course, but you can see how it's drying pretty uniform. There's an old Thunderbird in the garage. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and that about wraps this one up. Make sure you stay tuned for the next one, because it's going to be a real beauty. Have a good one.